then I am going to go and share my screen. Okay, so the topic of the day is how to analyze DNA data. So I'm going to try to start with what is DNA again, and what are centimorgans, which is the methodology that's used to evaluate DNA linkages, how those indicate our closeness to another person genealogically. And then we'll talk about 3 common DNA analysis methods. The centimorgan as an estimate of closeness and what information that gives you. A method called triangulation, which I'm a devotee of, and a new method called cluster analysis, which actually has existed for a long time, but has become much more popular as more data has been available. At the end of this session, I'm going to do an introduction to the topics of endogamy and pedigree collapse. These are situations where there is more genealogical closeness than you normally expect. So the classic example is the Ashkenazi Jewish population, which lived in a comparatively confined area, intermarried, and that means lots of genealogy, bringing lots of DNA. But now we're going to instead get our start with what DNA is. So in the simplest form, we're talking about 23 pairs of chromosomes consisting of 23. The mom has 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs. When the egg is developed, it has 23 of those chromosomes. The man has 23. He contributes, they combine and produce the 46 in the child. This is a cell. In the cell, you have the chromosome with the nuclear DNA. We'll talk very briefly. You also have mitochondria in each cell. And those have some value in DNA analysis. We'll talk briefly about that. This all came from the famous 1950s discovery of what DNA really was, credited initially to Watson and Crick, until people went back and remembered that the person who actually discovered it was Rosalind Franklin, who was the researcher who did the X-ray analysis to look at how DNA was constructed. When the Nobel Prize was issued to Watson and Crick, she was dead. She had died of cancer, probably cancer created from her radiation work. So this is what it looks like if you get a DNA into an analytical technique. This is from a man, 23 chromosomes, pairs of, made up of 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs. And this is a man because I've got an X and a Y at the end. And that's the uniqueness. We're not going to talk particularly about Y-DNA and mtDNA today, but the first DNA analyses that were done for your paternal line, and it consisted of a man who gets his DNA from his father, Y-DNA from his father. That's what makes him a man. Well, if you get it from your father, he got his from his grandfather, who got his from his grand. So it turns out that Y-DNA is a true way of looking at your total paternal line all the way up. All of us have X-DNA. Women have 2 X's. As a man, I have 1. I got mine from my mother, which means if I now analyze my mtDNA, which is that little piece that was inside the cell, it came from my mother. Well, she got hers from her mother, not from her father, et cetera, et cetera. And so you can go up the whole maternal line. It should be obvious that it's easier to go up the paternal line than the maternal line because the men don't change their names as frequently. Okay, but what we're going to talk about today mostly is autosomal DNA. This is where we are looking at DNA from a couple and how that shows up in their descendants so that you can match your DNA to someone else's and say, we must be related. So we have a couple here, and there we've colored it so that this is the man's DNA and that's the woman's DNA. And so they have a daughter. And so she has half of his DNA and half of her DNA. And what you want to know here is she doesn't have half of everything. It's some random thing. And then her brother has half. They each marry and they have children. Those children are first cousins. And what you find is there's this little piece of DNA that's come from the mother, and here a little piece that comes from the brother, and they match. And that's called identical by descent, IBD. And so most of what we're looking at when we're looking at DNA analysis is chunks of identical by descent DNA. Now, this is only for one chromosome. There are 23 of them. So this is my match with a second cousin. So chromosome 1 all the way to chromosome 23, which which here is only the X chromosome. Okay, so he matches me at this spot on chromosome 1, these spots on chromosomes 2, ... chromosome 10, ... So I can look at him and say, basically, here's where we match. In total, 337 of these things called centimorgans. So what is a centimorgan? Okay, your DNA is not only broken into chromosomes, it's also associated with what are called single nucleotide polymorphisms. There will be a test at the end. If you get it right, you will know how to spell polymorphism. But these are commonly called SNPs, SNPs. And so a SNP is a place in your DNA where there is a common occurrence of genetic difference. That may occur once every 100,000 generations or once a generation. So what they have done in the genealogy analysis community is gone through that list of SNPs and said, where these SNPs are in sequence, let's put enough of them together so the chance of a change in 100 generations is likely, a 1% chance in any one generation. Okay, so let's say these are centimorgans, 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row. If every 100 generations you have a chance, there's a change. If you and I match, okay, not a lot of information in that. But now suppose you match another person in many centimorgans. So I matched, in that first analysis we were doing, I matched at 433, I think it was, centimorgans. Okay, that's a lot. So when they take a sample from you and put it in a laboratory, they actually have a specialized chip, like an integrated circuit chip, that does this analysis for all 7,000 of these at one time. Click, they've got it. That's how they're able to sell these and make money, and they make a lot of money. So what they've done with these 7,000 is looked at how that relates to you and other people. So if you are a parent-child relation, you get 3,400 out of that. It's actually 6,800 SNPs, centimorgans that they have available. For a full sibling, most of them analyze it at 2550, even though it should be half. In other words, I got half and you got half, we should match about half. Because they only report half of the DNA. So you're only reporting the half you got from one of your parents. Half siblings, half, 1,700, that makes sense. And you can just go down this list and look at the level of centimorgan based on the distance someone is from you. So the easy thing to look at is look at a single generation change. So if first cousins are 850 centimorgans, a first cousin once removed, that means instead of my first cousin being the person who did the DNA analysis, it was his son. So that his relation to me is now a first cousin once removed. Well, he got half of his dad's DNA, so therefore he has 425. That should make complete sense. If you get to from a first cousin down to a second cousin, so my daughter is now matching against my cousin's son, that will be 212. Now take a look, 850 to 212. That's a factor of 4 difference. So moving one generation on both sides cuts the amount of common DNA by a factor of 4. Third cousins, 53. Fourth cousins, 13. This is one of the reasons if there's anyone living in your parents' generation, you want to get them tested. I got my mother tested a few years before she passed on, and that has provided an immense amount of information for me about her family. So this is the expected level. What is it we actually get when we do the analysis? So Blaine Bettinger, who's a well-known specialist in DNA, got thousands of people, actually hundreds of thousands of people, to submit their known relationships and the level of linkage that they got. So for a full sibling, theoretically 2550. Blaine's group were 2600 with a minimum of 2150 and a maximum of 3070. So you begin to get here the idea that the relationships are not pure. They shouldn't be, because if you get half of your dad's DNA and your cousin got half of his mom's DNA and they were brother and sister, it wouldn't surprise you that that number is not going to be exact. It's going to be some random thing. And as you get further distance, some of those relationships are zeros. And in fact, there's a whole discussion that says by the time you get to 9th or 10th cousins, virtually nobody will share DNA with you in a measurable level. So you can't really use DNA analysis to go much further than 6th cousins. That's about the limit. So this is Bettinger's master database. So he says, here you are. Here's what your parent and you should have, your child and you should have, grandchild, etc. And we have all of the analyses here for the different cousin-ages and all the analyses here for half cousin-ages. I don't know about you all, I got an awful lot of half cousins in my family tree. Half cousin obviously being where an ancestor, at least in the older generations, one member of the family died and the other one remarried and had more children. My third great grandfather, when his first wife died after she had borne him some 13 children, he remarried, had another 7, and the last child born was still living when Jack Kennedy was inaugurated, and his father had been born when George Washington was still living. So if that doesn't blow your mind. Okay, so one group has said, you know, those numbers are awfully similar. Okay, if I get a number of 800, how do I know whether it's a niece or nephew or an uncle, or maybe it's a half, you know, I mean, how do I know who that is? So what they've done is said, okay, here's a range of results you could get in your DNA. And here are the probable people it could be. Okay, Again, that makes a lot of sense, I think. And it gives you a chance to look at what possible relationships, if you've got somebody, Elihu was just talking about somebody who matched him perfectly as a second cousin. Well, a perfect second cousin can also be a first cousin twice removed or a half first cousin once removed. So there are lots of other relationships that may not be as obvious as when you get the piece of paper back from Ancestry that says this person's a second cousin. So one of the things that I found very valuable is something called the shared Centimorgan tool. And I've got a link to it in the links I mentioned at the beginning. So if you enter the number of Centimorgans for a match, it will produce a statistical percentage from Bettinger's table. So we're starting with Bettinger's table, and we're producing percentages. So if you had 150 Centimorgans, okay, there'd be a 54% chance it would be one of these people, 24% one of those, et cetera, down to 0. And the other thing you can do is you can say, let me look at first cousin once removed. And in the statistical chart, 97 people had a relationship between 100 and 200 Centimorgans, 374 between 200 and 300, et cetera. And this is the tail of the curve up here. Now, here's how you can use that. We're looking at the question about whether Harry had more than one wife. So here we're looking at Harry's children. Hi, Alan. We're looking at Harry's children, and we're looking at the relationship to Alan. Okay, so Hannah's son Alan has this relationship to his cousins, his first cousins, second cousins. And these people, this is their actual relationship in the genealogy chart. And this is the actual theoretical Centimorgans for a full cousin. And this is for a half cousin. All right, well, where it's relevant is we're looking at the question about whether Michael or Lewis's children might be half cousins instead of full cousins. That's how you'd know that Harry had more than one wife. So in looking at that, I have one column that's the shared Centimorgans expected from a half cousin, another the shared Centimorgans from a full cousin. Now let's go back and put those numbers in. So the place I'm picking is Lewis's children, okay, where the smallest number was 18 and the largest number was actually 172, but 176 is what I put in. And what it says is, if you have a number of 18, the chances of it being a third cousin, where was third cousin? Down here. Third cousin is 8%. The chance of being a third cousin once removed is 16%. Sorry, half third cousin is 16%. So that's a 2-to-1 ratio that would favor saying that's a half third cousin. But if I've got 176, the third cousin is 11% and the half third cousin is 2%. So subject to an awful lot of other analysis, this would say, there's not a lot of evidence from the DNA that relationship isn't a third cousin relationship. It looks more like a third cousin than it does like a third cousin once removed. And let's take those same numbers and look at a half third cousin. 18 would be in this first 75, but that's also over here, the 425. Whereas the 176, that would be pretty rare for a half third cousin, where it would be reasonably common for a third cousin. And of course, these are all subject to the endogamy caution that the numbers are likely to be slightly higher than they would be for a random population. So where do you get Centimorgan data? All the major DNA sites have it readily available. And what I do is create a spreadsheet. So this would be a spreadsheet that I have. Those of you who showed on early, I have one I'm actually working on today. So it says, okay, I have a family here, okay, and in that family, I have a first cousin. She shows up with a 705 Centimorgan connection. Theoretically, that should be 850. So that's pretty close. Then I have three second cousins, okay? And what I've written in here is if you go to Ancestry, you aren't going to find someone named Nancy Loy who has a database. You're going to find that she has it as NJ Loy 1427. So that's how I find her when I go back to Ancestry. Well, I know that she is related to my great-grandfather Charles, and by his son Joseph Blaine. Okay, 248, 212 looks pretty good. So I create these databases, and when I get into ones there are, this is FTDNA, that's 23andMe. I can begin to look at, and I don't have them on here, the actual chromosomes where there's a link. But I find this kind of a spreadsheet is very valuable in trying to understand what we're looking at in terms of relationships. So in Ancestry, here's where you find that information. This is a different relative. This is my grandfather's sister, Polly. Okay, and you can see that I have these various people in her family from her various children. Polly married, would you believe it, a Hearst. And these are all, and you see the relationships. Brockton's second cousin twice removed. Timothy's a second cousin once removed, etc. So I can, these, by the way, these are reasonable numbers if you went back to the overall links. So those would be in my database under Samuel Mckinney, who is the common ancestor. So this is what I do to get my hands around the data. And by using this data in a situation like this, where I can begin to ask questions, I can determine whether the overall data leads me in one direction versus another in terms of the relationship. And my published paper I did a few years ago, I had the situation where my great-great-grandfather was born out of wedlock. And I knew who his grandparents were, but they had three daughters who were of the age they could have been his mother. And I knew, by the way, who his illegitimate father was. So the real question was, which of the three women? Well, it was easy because when I went through this analysis and I spread down my relationship to the half, to those people who were potentially half related at a high level to me, half because each of those women later on got married. I found that it was obvious that one of them was much closer at a second, third cousin level. The others were all fourth cousin level. Okay, let's go to triangulation. So the basic idea, we looked at Marcellus earlier, okay, and we saw that he had a big chunk where he matched me on chromosome 10. Well, now we're going to look at Michael Mckinney. Michael's another relationship of mine from the same Samuel Mckinney grouping. And look here on chromosome 10. Michael matches me on chromosome 10. They both match me on chromosome 2 in 2 places and on chromosome 4 in 1 place. So these places are called triangulations. More than one person sharing the same common ancestor shares the same piece of DNA. And what's been shown by the people who've been doing this for years is I'm carrying around, this is the part of my DNA that is from Samuel Mitchell Mckinney. Came down to me. There it is. So going back to my spreadsheet, okay, I have a second spreadsheet where I break every chromosome down by where I have matches. And so this is my matches. This and these are the matches on chromosome 10. There you can see Marcellus and Michael. So let's start off by looking at Darby. Who is Darby Smith? Well, he is my third great grandfather, and all these people match me, but he's on my mother's side. So these are the parts of chromosome 10 that are coming from my mother. These are the parts that are coming from my father. Is that clear? You're going to get two different sets of chromosome matches for every chromosome section. So I've got this chunk from Darby Smith, and I got that chunk from Samuel Mitchell Mckinney. Now, all these other people match me in the same region that Marcellus and Michael match me. But their relationship is different. It's with these people, Belcher and Dillon. Who are they? Well, would you believe that they are Samuel Mitchell Mckinney's ancestors? Samuel Dillon is in fact Samuel Mitchell Mckinney's maternal grandfather. And here are all the Dillons and Belchers that we saw down here sharing their DNA with each other. So in fact, you could pretty legitimately say that this chunk of DNA in here is coming to me from Isham Belcher. And down here where Sandra matches me, okay, through Samuel Dillon himself, okay, and that section around the 70s, okay, that's probably coming from Richard Belcher. So that's the 6th generation back piece of DNA I've got from one of my Belcher ancestors. That's what triangulation is all about. So Ancestry does not offer triangulation data. You can't get it. All the other sites allow you to get some comparisons. 23andMe, this is the segments on chromosome 10 from a couple of other people who are also part of that same family. That's what it looks like if you go on to 23andMe and ask for the chromosome match. This is MyHeritage. Again, this is a different group of a different place of matches. This is actually my Lilly family. And in GEDmatch, you can actually do a run for triangulation. You can actually say, go through every piece of data you've got and show me where people match. So we're going to now move to cluster analysis for a minute. Cluster analysis appeared first about 10 years ago on a very specialized site called DNA GEDanalysis, DNA GEDmatch. And it was cute when it first appeared. It's now taken over as lots and lots of data become available. So what you're doing here is looking at the entire DNA batch base and creating groupings of people who match you and who match each other. So you're looking at focusing on a common ancestor for each cluster. MyHeritage and GEDmatch have built-in cluster programs. GEDmatch, by the way, allows you to upload your DNA data from 23andMe, FTDNA, or Ancestry. And then there's a company called Genetic Affairs that also allows you to upload DNA data and calculate clusters. So what is a cluster? This is a cluster. So they've gone through all of my data and they've determined that this green group, okay, all are interrelated in some way. They share a chunk of DNA with each other. And because here's Stephanie Smithart, who's my sweetheart in the Darby Smithart world. And so I know that this is Darby. That's who these people they all relate to Darby. Here's a second cluster and a third cluster. Okay, by the way, the little gray signs here means people who are matching that aren't in a cluster but still match. This is the same thing from Genetic Affairs. This is a complete analysis that I did. You can play with the parameters of the analysis, so you can get something like this that is literally enormous, or you can limit it to a certain size. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 clusters, each one of which is associated with one of my premier ancestors. So what is the challenge? Well, actually, part of the challenge is once you begin to see where you link, either through cluster analysis or triangulation, you may not have a family tree, okay? Or the family tree may exist, but it just doesn't connect. So how do you find your family tree if you don't have it? Well, on Ancestry, sometimes there's a public tree. They just haven't connected their DNA result to it, and you can go to the public tree and find where the fit is. You can often contact them. Every one of the DNA sites allows you to contact other people. And my experience has been I get a fairly decent response, decent being like 1 in 3. And they're better if you can suggest a relationship, which given triangulation or clustering, you may be able to do. So if I had someone who matched Stephanie Smithhart and me on my mother's side of my DNA, there's a pretty good chance that person has a Smithhart in their history, and I can talk to them that way. You can search their names or their code names. Like I mentioned, the one woman who had a complex little code name she uses on Ancestry. And see if you can find them on Ancestry, even if you have found their DNA on GEDmatch. And GEDmatch has codes for where the person put in their DNA from, without going into the detail. If their code starts with the letter A, would you believe it comes from Ancestry? I have been successful a couple of times by searching names, code names, and email addresses on Google. And along with like a word like genealogy or family. And then you get a bunch of cases where like you'll find somebody's put a tree in, it goes back 2 generations and nobody looks familiar. And I'll be honest, what I've looked for there is someplace where the geography works. These people were in fact in the same part of Tennessee that my mother's family came from, and tried to build out the tree myself. So this is not necessarily a cheap hobby. Okay. Ancestry, you can't give them other DNA testing data. You have to test on Ancestry. And for all the functionality, you have to be a subscriber. 23andMe, again, only allows their own DNA test on their site, but you can transfer your DNA results elsewhere. 23andMe, to be honest, is basically about health and genetics in that sense. MyHeritage allows you to upload your DNA from elsewhere and look at DNA matches. They're sort of structured around the weird idea that you build a family website on MyHeritage and allow other people to see what you're doing. If you want to take advantage of all of their functions, it's about $150 a year. GEDcom, you can upload data from any of the websites. They have a lot of these tools. And to take full advantage, you want to contribute $10 a month. If you use it, obviously you can contribute. In any of these cases, there is a 1-month only alternative. DNA GEDcom still exists as very specialized tools. I would say you don't want to go there unless you've exhausted what you can get out of the other sites. Genetic Affairs is interesting. It's a relatively new player, and what they do is allow you to purchase what they call credits. And then you run a test, and each test costs about $1. But you can run all the ones you want or as few as you want. And Genie, which I'll talk about in a minute, has specialized tools also. If you're on family tree DNA, you'll find one of the frustrations is you have very poor family tree data. So you may have great data on DNA analysis and matching, but you just don't have anything on the people's trees. So they combined with a company called Genie, and the two link the information. Genie is a place where people put in family trees, and they link the two, and that has a lot of value, among other things, because Family Tree is the only company that does Y-DNA and mtDNA analysis. And I would say if you haven't done Y-DNA and mtDNA testing, you should consider it. If you're a man or woman, mtDNA will give you your mother's maternal line. In order to get my father's maternal line, I paid for one of my female cousins, who was the daughter of my father's sister, to do her mtDNA test, and that obviously goes back across my father's maternal line. And then the Y-DNA, the same logic. If you're a woman and you want to get a Y-DNA test of your family, what you want to do is find somebody who is a direct descendant of your father or paternal father, your father or your paternal grandfather. And if they do a Y-DNA test, it'll be a good test of your family. Okay, we're going to introduce the ideas of endogamy and pedigree collapse one more time, but I'm going to talk about that more next month. So endogamy is where a population is inbred. The classic example is the Ashkenazi, where people living in these communities in Eastern Europe would typically intermarry within the community or within nearby other communities of the Jewish population. And the result is you just get lots more DNA than you expect for a certain relationship. However, I have a lot of endogamy. And that's because the early settlers of Virginia, would you believe, had a lot of descendants. Those descendants ended up in rural Appalachia, which is where I'm from. And the statistics look a lot like the Ashkenazi. What's more important, however, is this pedigree collapse question. We start by assuming each relationship is unique. So if I have a first cousin, we share a brother and sister in our parents. I also have a situation where my grandfather's brother married my grandmother's sister. Okay, this was not intermarriage in the sense of brothers marrying sisters. Instead, it was intermarried. But in our generation, the people who match me, who are their grandchildren, are in fact double first cousins. So they have literally twice as much of the DNA from those four people than would be expected in a match. So we're going to talk about pedigree collapse and how to deal with that and where it exists next time. So tried to cover all those things today. With that in mind, be happy to take questions. Nobody has a question? All right, Don and then Nancy. You need to unmute yourself, Don.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Good. I use Ancestry, and probably like a lot of people here, on one side of my family, I have a common surname, Edwards. On the other side of my mother's family, I have a unique surname, Bethea, B-T-H-E-A. So both families have been here a long time. I'm the 12th generation Edwards in the New World, and the 10th generation Bethea. Now, when I get the information from various relatives, because there's intermarriage in the families, both sides, just what you're talking about, sometimes I can go through more than one line. What I found helps when I'm answering emails from people is if they can be clear as to which lines that they happen to come from.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's helped is that, especially my mother's family, every 2 years we've had a family reunion for more than 100 years. So I've been able to meet a lot of the relatives, and we're able to share documents that go back to the original immigrant. Fortunately, with the original immigrant, when he came from London to Virginia, he was literate. So there are a lot of records of his name, but it was spelled B-A-T-H-Y, and in America it's spelled B-E-T-H-E-A. So by doing the research that I did with the various relatives, we were able to figure out that even though the name is spelled differently, it's all the same family. My question to you is that when you're wanting to answer people, how much do you want to share in regards to what they're asking for, where some people are just very, very concrete on what they want to know, and others are simply very vague thing with the idea, well, I think we're cousins because we match somewhere in the DNA group, but sometimes those are people like third, fourth, fifth cousins. So what's your focus when you try to answer people?
Well, I run at 3 levels, Don. One level, I simply refer them to my own tree. Okay, so that's the lowest level. I say, take a look at the tree, see where if you can figure out where we match. Now, I have been very disciplined about, I always have put in every first cousin of my own line that I can find. So for example, when I get to my great-great-grandfather's family, every grandchild of his is in my database. Okay, so that allows people, for example, the people who may know that their last name was Hurst. Okay, going back to the example I used earlier, Hurst, they're going to be able to link in and say, oh, I can find Sherwood Hurst and his family in George's database. Okay, and often they know already. They just haven't built their tree out that much. The second thing I will do is, if it's somebody who I think is a little more linked into how I would do genealogy, I'll provide them with a number of pieces of information: geography, main family names, and time frames. Okay, so the Mckinney family moved to the Mercer County, then Virginia, now West Virginia area about 1790. Okay, and intermarried with these other families. Okay, so I'm giving them a lot of information so that they can say, oh, I see the Lilly family is one of those. I've got Lilies in my family. Let's see if I can find the Lilly combo. Then I'll go to the third level. There are people where I will work my tail off to find the link. And personally, I've actually spent a fair amount of time with people who don't, I guess I would say, who have a problem in their lineage that may be a non-paternal event, meaning that there's some place in their lineage that makes them a Mckinney, but they don't know where the heck it is.
Okay.
And there was a case I'm most proud of where some woman who's descended from my Lilly line, okay, knew that her grandfather was nicknamed something, and she had the nickname, but it was an illegitimate birth, so she didn't know what his actual name was. Damn if in my database I didn't have that nickname for one of the Lilies, and they were the obvious people. In a DNA analysis, she was matching with my Lilies. Nancy, you have something?
I don't really have a question. I think I have to go back and do 7th grade science to understand DNA.
I don't think you have to understand DNA as much as trying to understand the idea of what kind of an analytical method makes you most comfortable.
Well, I found my birth grandfather. My mother was an whatever you call this, an illegitimate child, and put up for adoption. And I didn't know her father's name, and I found him.
Okay, that's what you're supposed to be doing. That's where all the value of this is.
A lot of cousins.
A lot of cousins. Okay, any other comments, questions, thoughts? Jim?
Yeah, I joined the clan McFarlane and did the DNA through them. Did my own research and came to a dead end. Anyway, my question is, they keep wanting me to do more SNPs.
Yep.
Is that early in the progression?
Yeah, let me, I can take that one, Jim. In the Y-DNA analysis, they have the ability to look at lots of SNPs, okay? And so you typically start off with a number, I forget the exact number, it's like 60 SNPs. And then if you still don't have the information that you want, you can increase it to like 120 or, these aren't the right numbers, but it's the type of thing. And then as you do that, you begin to be able to hone down better within the clan or the family to find out better. And McFarland, probably like Mckinney, has the problem that this is not the only spelling of the people.
Yes.
You know, so would you believe my name and the late Senator McCain both derived from exactly the same clans in Scotland? So, you know, they're just spelled differently in America. That's because when they got in, we didn't know how to spell. All we knew was how to pronounce the name. They even, with the ability of names as common as Edwards, okay, they have the ability to get down to a very specific SNP, which they have been able to determine is the difference between two branches. And you can go in and say, I want that one tested. Okay. And needless to say, the McKinneys haven't that, and I doubt the McFarlands do either. Okay, other questions or input? Alan.
Hi, George. Yeah, I just want to let you know, for anybody who hasn't done the DNA testing, be ready for some surprises. There's no such thing as family secrets anymore. I found a first cousin of mine who I grew up with, who's alive, but he had a daughter that he never knew about that I kind of sorted out. And I found that my father and his two brothers, all of them are now deceased, had a half sister that they never knew about. So yeah, be ready for some surprises.
She's willing to talk about it situations here at Oakmont is, I don't know how many of you know Anita Roras, who is in the staff. She's the person who handles scheduling. And Anita did her DNA and found a half brother. Okay. And it turned out that her father had had a relationship 2 years before he got married. When he left the relationship, he didn't know it, but the woman was pregnant. And so she subsequently had, okay. And she said she has been delighted to be able to meet her brother, and he's been glad to come in with the whole family. And she said the thing that's really weird is he is the spitting image of his dad. So to her, it's really, really weird. Okay, other comments or thoughts?
If I could ask a question, please.
Sure.
Deborah, hi. Since you brought up that subject, I'm asking for help in regard to my brother is my full brother. We've learned that my sister, who has passed away, was our half sister. And we think that her father later on down the line became our stepfather. So I would like to find that out, because her two sons grew up with, his name is Tom, as their grandfather. And it could be that he's biological and not a step. And they've had their DNA done. How can I get help in trying to sort that out?
Well, let's talk about how you would sort it out first, and then we can talk about how the help would go.
Okay.
What you want to do is find Tom's family. Okay.
Okay.
In other words, if you were if let's say Tom had a sister, just to use an example, I don't know that he did, but let's say Tom had a sister, and let's say she had children. Okay.
Okay.
You and those children would have no match.
Right.
But you and your deceased sister's children, they would have a match.
Yes.
Okay, because I mean, so they would be half first cousins. Okay, so it's a matter of going up the tree until you find the place where the link really was. Okay, or might have been. Okay, and then you just start looking down from there and see who you can find. Does that make sense?
Well, I have not found anybody that has the same last name. The last name is Whitcomb. And it hasn't shown up in anybody on 23andMe.
Well, what I have done in the past, and I did this for the big research I did to find my great-great-grandfather's father and mother, well, father, which was the unknown for sure, is I just got to the point I started writing people who were on Ancestry or other places where I could find their genealogy.
Mhm.
And I could say, okay, you were related. Let's ask you if you can you'll do a DNA test for me. Okay.
Okay.
And I paid for some of those tests, but in a lot of cases they were perfectly happy to do it. Okay. The ultimate test I did in finding my own third great grandfather, okay, who was the unknown, was once I'd figured out who it was, and I did have Y DNA data, meaning paternal line, down his normal line. I got it down, somebody down my line who was willing to do a Y DNA test. And when they matched perfectly, we knew we had the right grandfather.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be typically where you would look, Deborah. And the thing is, people are not going to normally show up. Now, one other thing you can do, let me pull up my presentation one more second because it's worth referencing. Okay, if you go back to this table, okay, so I'm going to go to this table. There we go. So you have this information. Let's now look at actual DNA. You're going to find people like on 23andMe that they don't have a tree, or you don't know who they are, et cetera, right?
Right.
So you're looking for a half first cousin or so. You with me?
Yes.
So the ideal thing would be if you could find a half first cousin for one of your sister's children, not for you.
Right.
You won't match with any of Tom's family,
Right.
right? He was your stepfather.
Correct.
Okay, so half first cousins down in here, give you a number in this 200 to 600 kind of range. Okay, so look for a stray person who you can't identify who's in this range.
Okay.
And contact them and just basically say, I'm trying to find links to, and then you know Tom's last name, you can put it in. You can put location in, okay?
Right.
I mean, one of the weirdest ones I found was, I found a half second cousin. And when I did all the linking, it came through my mother's half brother, Bob Phillips' line. And Bob Phillips has lived his whole life and his whole family, except during the war, World War II. They lived their whole lives in Southern West Virginia. And the illegitimate child that was looking for a father was born in San Diego.
Oh.
So you sort of say, what? But then I figured out, one of Bob's boys was in the Navy.
Aha.
And if you're in the Navy, one's the places you can be.
You're in
is
San Diego.
So his sister has done, actually his niece has done DNA, and checking her match, I was able to identify who the unexpected father was.
So you would recommend 23andMe for the best course to do a DNA?
23andMe is very good if you are interested in the health side of it. If you have any interest in the health side, you want to be on 23andMe. If you're on 23andMe, it has reasonable DNA for genealogy, and you can move that data over to the FTDNA and the GEDmatch sites. So you can expand it. If, on the other hand, you're solely interested in genealogy, Ancestry is the place you got to go.
Okay.
Okay, it has such powerful tools. Unfortunately, once again, if you want to do triangulation or clustering, you got to take the DNA, download it, and put it someplace else.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other? Oh, there's Nancy and Eliu. Eliu gets first shot. Nancy.
To sort of go on the opposite side of what you've been saying about how wonderful it is to find people. I'll give two examples. One was another GEDmatch contact that I got from someone who somehow thinks his mother is connected to me by whatever, but his mother knows she was adopted, knows that her mother has an idea who her mother is, but her father, there's an illegitimate issue there. And his mother was dying, so she wanted to find out who her father was, and that we looked, but we couldn't figure out anything despite,
yeah.
But it really brings up the other issue of families where they don't want to know, or where finding out illegitimacy or parentage that's different than the stated parentage creates problems religiously, abilities to marry, etc. Certainly in Orthodox Jewish families that will be an issue, and in other families that's issue. No one seems to have that come up here, except, as I said, this case that I got contacted about. But
years ago, before the DNA world, this discussion would generate around adoption.
Yes.
Okay, because people who knew they were adopted and wanted to find their natural family, often were anxious psychologically to be welcomed into their birth family.
Yes.
And the first caution that you would give them would be, please understand there's a very good chance if you find your family, they will not welcome you. That they do not want to know you exist. They don't want to know about you. Okay. Now you may still want to know who they are.
Yeah, but we even read things like that I would say in the last 2 years, I've seen a number of articles in the paper about that happening now, and that there's major splits in families about that now.
Oh yeah. Well, looking
and
on here,
especially if there's racial issues.
There's a person I'm not going, who's a member of the club that is not on today, who has been tracking a particular adoption situation. Okay, and let me say that she figured out from the DNA who the father and mother were, and had to be, because the DNA link with certain people was so strong, it just had to be mathematically. And so she contacted a woman who would have been her aunt or half aunt, okay, who just went bananas. Just, that cannot be possible. My brother cannot possibly have ... It was not a happy circumstance. Nancy, you had your hand up.
I was just going to say, I think it was to Deborah. What I did is look at the common names that showed up. I didn't know, they weren't familiar to me, but there were a lot of the same names. And I started going, what is this? And then reaching out to them. And that's how I found my birth grandfather. So you get a list from Ancestry of all of your relatives, and all of a sudden you see, oh, there's a dozen Coxes on here. Who are these people? I've never heard of them. And so that's one way of doing it without looking too much at how close the Centimorgs are or anything.
Right. I'm trying to build his family tree as far back as I can go, just to see if that's going to help.
Yeah, and that, for example, if you saw the stuff I was doing earlier with my grandfather's sister who married a man whose last name was Hearst, okay?
Mhm.
When you start contacting people, the ability to include the Cox, the Hearst, the whoever, you know, these other names as well, because they themselves may not feel as firmly about the parentage and grandparentage. I've seen plenty of family trees, okay, that are only half a tree. You know, they've traced back one side, and it isn't a matter of adoption or something. It's just that's where they do all their work. Okay. Any last comments before Alan?
Yeah, I just want to echo George's comment about ancestry versus 23andMe, where 23andMe is better for health and ancestry is better for genealogy. I've spit in the bottle for both, and I find that I get a much higher response ratio to people on Ancestry than I do 23andMe. So the people who do Ancestry are interested in this family tree stuff and more willing to respond to you than the folks that are on 23andMe who may have absolutely no interest in genealogy and are just doing it for health. So
That makes sense.
Okay, I'm going to leave you with one more Mckinney trick. Okay. If part of your family, my wife is half Polish, comes from a part of the world where spelling has differed in the United States, let's just simply say that different branches of the family ended up with different versions of spelling. I have found if you go on to the Stephen Morse website that does the searching of the immigration records, and you put in your name, so let me use Kotkovsky, which is my wife's grandfather's name, Kotkovsky, and you search for all the people who immigrated in a couple of years, okay, it's going to give you all of the alternative spellings in that list of people. So, you know, you can run your eye down that list of people and say, well, I wouldn't have thought that Konarski and Kotkovsky would be the same name. But somehow Steve Morse and his partners who did this, when they put it in, that's what comes out. So now I'll look for the Konarski too. And Deborah, with any name that has alternative spellings, a method of looking at alternative spellings, it really can help, because you know, I mean, it took me years to find my wife's grandmother's brother. Her name was Bardzikowska, and so he was Bardzikowski, and I couldn't find him. Well, all his children changed their name to Bard.
There you go.
You know, very much more American and easier for the employer to remember. Okay.
I have one more question.
Yeah, Peggy.
Do you think that, do you agree with what I heard was that you probably shouldn't bother with people who have less than 100 centimorgans?
No, don't agree with that.
You don't?
No. What you want to be looking at, I'm going to take a diversion, and if you want to sign off, we're welcome to. I'm going to take a look at the Ancestry site. See, let's go here. Okay. Okay, so I'm going on to Ancestry to what is called through lines. Okay. And we talked a little bit about this earlier. So this is my Ancestry, and on Ancestry, what they've done is find all the people who have trees that link to your named ancestors that you might relate to. So here's my great-great-grandfather, Samuel Paris Mckinney, okay, 266 matches, okay, and there are a lot of matches because there's been a lot of people who tested. And if you look at any one of them, okay, I'm getting down to 13, 50. I got a 50 here. I've got the number here. These are hardcore relationships. Okay. Finding them can be finding who they are. If all you have is the name, you don't have a tree, may be hard, but they're important relationships. That makes sense?
I can't see how many Centimorgans. I couldn't read it.
All right. Well, let me go back here. So if you run your eye down here, these are all the people who are related to me by way of various of my Christian ancestors. So when I get back to David Christian, who is my second great grandfather, I've got all these people who are showing up with Centimorgans in the 20s.
Wow.
Okay. And I think I'm learning a lot about that family by looking at these links. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And why is this important? It's important for a couple of reasons for me. One of which is that I really want to be able to fill out the tree at the level of cousins. Okay. So knowing that I match John Wiley Christian's family, okay, down here, okay, helps me in filling out that tree, okay, and I guess, yeah, this is Rhonda Tischler. I would never, in my wildest dreams, think that Rhonda Tischler was likely to be a relative. You with me? The name never even imagined, much less Quintana. Okay, so the answer is yes, I find them important. Okay, somebody raised her hand and I was on the other. Ooh, Annette.
It's me, it's Annette. Yeah. A couple of comments. The first one on less than 100 centimorgans. If I didn't go for less than 100 centimorgans, the only people I would find are my first and second cousins. But there are so many of them that I have identified down in the 20, 30, 40, 50 centimorgan range. And some of them because my tree is pretty good in some areas. And especially if I can get some triangulation, that really helps me identify them. I don't look for anything under 20 because by that time it's usually so fragmented and so far back. The other comment I have is that fully half of my research is on my Polish side. And as far as names are concerned, what Steve Morris has done is he's using an indexing. If you remember a long time ago, in order to find anything in the census, you had to use what was it called, a Soundex index or something like that?
Yep.
Well, there are a couple other ways of indexing names which allow you to pull out similar names. And that's what he's done. There is a website called Genealogy, Genoteca Genealogy that is a database generated by a whole bunch of genealogy fanatics in Poland. They're indexing all the vital records from the archives that they can find. And sometimes it's really kind of funny because sometimes what they're indexing are the records they're getting off of Family Search that they have digitized from their filmings in Poland. But nevertheless, it's a wonderful website. And if you put a name in there, they come up with all kinds of spellings and you're sitting there going, huh? That can't, that it's it's some of the letters can be misconstrued. So it's a problem of reading the record as well as putting it into a Latin alphabet form. So we who don't have the knowledge of the special letters that the Poles have can do the searching, but it's a real trick sometimes in order to find the names, because one letter misspelled, if you need to have an exact match, you have a hard time finding them because of the changes that were made when the Poles came over here to the spelling, because of the special letters that the Poles have.
Not to mention that often the spelling that you get is based on what the ship's captain or first mate wrote down in Germany before the ship left Hamburg. And he might have been much more comfortable with understanding how a Polish name worked than he did a Russian name. But if you're from Eastern Poland, you may be Russian, you may be Polish, and you may be Jewish. So lots of different alternatives. Okay.
Exactly. And Russian is even more of a conundrum, because some of their Greekized letters as opposed to Latinized letters, and so a two names spelled with the characters that they would each use don't always even look similar.
Okay, Peter, you had a comment.
I just wanted to ask Annette for the name of that website, to put that in, if she can spell it out.
Okay, well, okay. It's if you just do a Google on genealogy, or Geneteka, Geneteka, is the first part of the whole website. It'll pop up with the alternatives or additional spelling.
Okay, George, one other, just to amplify the question about 100 centimorgans, whether it's worthwhile or not. Would you agree in the case of Ashkenazi Jews, where we have so much endogamy that, talk about drinking from a fire hose, we get such a wide range that some of them aren't useful?
Well, I think, let me make a distinction here that we're going to talk more about this next month, okay? Because that's when we sort of dig into the endogamy more. Where we sort of skipped over the idea of the size of the total linkage with you and another person in Centimorgans is when we go back and look at triangulation. When we look at triangulation, what we get is several people who may match you in the same part of chromosome 10 or chromosome 2. That's where the power comes, Peter. Okay. So the people who are really into triangulation, their cutoff typically is 5 to 7. Okay. Because they say, if I can get good triangulation on 7 centimorgans in the same chromosome, okay, I can statistically, if I get 3 or 4 people, I can statistically say, okay, we're all coming down from that same great-great-grandfather. Okay, I can put my finger on him. And to be honest, in Eastern Europe, sometimes that finger is going on a spot where you don't know the first name. Okay, but you can say, okay, I got 3 different brothers here and a sister, and they all come from that same stem, and we're all matching on this little piece of DNA. But they've convinced me anyway that if you can get that, you're pretty solid. And the thing about the endogamy side, and this is a distinction we'll talk about next month, is most of us have a problem when we have near-term pedigree overlap. Okay, grandparents who are related. Okay, I've got my paternal grandparents were second cousins once removed. Okay, so there's a little chunk of, you know, Tommy Cadle that I'm getting both sides coming down. Okay, and that means anytime I match with somebody over on the other side who has a piece of Tommy Cadle in him, we got more than a normal relationship. Okay, and the what I think has been powerful is by moving from the idea of endogamy, which I'd almost describe as background. It's just that in the whole population, there's this, we all come, I mean, you know, the Ashkenazi Jewish thing that what is it, 50% of the, or some number like this, of all the people who are Ashkenazi Jewish can trace back to 5 women back in the period, you know, 12 to 1400. I mean, you know, and in the Jewish population, that's very important because, you know, your ability to trace is based on your maternal line very heavily. But the idea that you intermarry, if you came through early Virginia, okay, I hate to say it, but you almost certainly are related to me. Okay, you know, I mean, you know, it just happens that a lot of those people had a lot of kids, and the kids that survived intermarried, and you know, I mean, it was like anything else. I mean, the reason people intermarried their cousins was because there was nobody around to marry. That's who you knew. Okay, guys, we'll see you next month. All have a great month, and hopefully we're all getting vaccinated and about ready to step out a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay. We got our first donuts the other day.
Oh, wow.
No, and we're Dunkin' Donuts freaks. That was our okay. Take care, all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.